They felt that by removing a portion of my colon would rid me of my ulcerative colitis. I was at wit's end.
Why can't any doctor figure out what is going on with him? Because now we're going a second time around.
He looked like he was skin and bones.
Being in the hospital, losing all the weight, looking so pale and white and just sickly. I mean, it was scary.
I try not to rely on others, but going in the hospital, you just feel so helpless, and the support of family and friends and the people in the hospital that take care of you, God bless them.
Welcome to The Incurables. I'm Don Wildman. Ron Mueller grew up in a tight-knit Midwestern family. He was a cherished son and an idolized brother and uncle. They were roles that Ronnie took very seriously and worked hard to live up to. Whatever needed to be done, whoever needed help, Ronnie was the one they came to. His overwhelming sense of responsibility was a burden. Of course, he'd never admit that. But constantly being available for everyone else meant that there was less time to take care of himself. But he never complained. Even when he wasn't feeling quite right, Ron carried on. Until finally, his body demanded that he seek some help of his own.
Being diagnosed with ulcerative colitis was devastating to me because at the time I was playing softball a lot. The teams that I were on, we were traveling in different cities. I couldn't make those trips anymore.
You don't want your big brother to get sick. He's your rock. He's, everything to you, especially when you only have one brother. You don't want anything to happen to him.
He was skin and bones. And, your body can only take so much. And that's all he was getting was intravenous because of his colon, the bleeding colon. They couldn't just feed him anything either.
You want him home, you want him healthy, you want him eating things that he can eat and not having to be uncomfortable and not wonder, is he going to get better? Is this going to get worse? You don't want him to have major surgery.
It's a scare when you see that because you don't know what's going to happen.
And no matter how old your child is, you always worry about them.
You feel helpless as a parent. What can I do?
I felt my son was going to have this condition the rest of his life. Every year when the holidays come around, I was in fear that he would get another bout with it.
They say they don't know what causes it. Stress doesn't help it. There's good stress, bad stress. As far as a cure, they say they don't know of one yet. They're doing a lot of research on it. But in their eyes, there isn't a cure. I grew up in the northwest suburbs, Mount Prospect, Illinois.
Ron was a very laid-back type kid. Liked to stay in the background, never needed or wanted a lot of attention.
His sisters sometimes were a little hectic or chaotic, but he was just very easygoing and just went along with anything.
Just a good boy.
By all accounts, Ron was everything you could ask for in a son growing up. He got good grades, he stayed out of trouble, he was helpful around the house. His parents were understandably proud of their only son.
Ronnie was always considered, the golden boy, because he was the only boy. Ronnie could never do no wrong, it seemed like a lot of times in our family.
I was involved in a lot of sports. Sports used to be my life. Played, Little League. I always had friends through school or the neighbors that I would be playing in the street, baseball and football and hockey and ground ball game, where we just go in the street and throw each other grounders and acted like we were professional athletes. Kind of hoping to live that dream of becoming professional athletes because back then, they were like my heroes.
My childhood memory of Ronnie was really just very active. We'd always go to his Little League baseball games and, there was the very big following with that and that was pretty unique. And then, he played basketball and just always on the go.
I grew up with Bulls season tickets, Blackhawks tickets.
We've been going to Chicago Bulls games for 22 years, and he has every ticket stub from all of 22 years.
Being the only boy, I was the big brother, even though I had an older sister. You know, my sisters, I think, always relied on me. You know, we had our fights, our moments, as all siblings do, but, you know, love them to death.
Ron and his 3 sisters have always been very close. As the siblings grew older and started their own families, their bonds grew even stronger.
He likes to go to the nieces and nephews, you know, soccer games and baseball games and football games and basketball games, whatever it might be.
My kids, my sister kids, they just run right to him. Uncle, uncle, uncle. And you know how you have in families, like you'll say, oh, Uncle Bob, Uncle Ted. He's uncle. He's not Uncle Ron, he's uncle.
Kevin was his first nephew, his first godchild, and one of Kevin's first words, believe it or not, was gunkle.
He just lights up their life.
If there was something sisters needed, brother was there to help them constantly. He's the first one to help do something. It's that simple. Somebody calls and asks, Ron, give me a hand. He's the first one there to help, no matter who it is.
I think he, by far, keeps our family together.
I was in my mid-20s. I was still really active, you know, playing pickup games of basketball or softball, golfing. Right around Thanksgiving of '97, I was just getting stomach pains, and you know, I still had an appetite and everything like that, you know, but I was just, you know, running to the washroom more than I would want to.
One day Ron came to me upstairs and said, Mom, when I went to the bathroom, there was blood. Well, of course, I panicked because, you know, right away you assume something's wrong.
Ron wasn't a sickly boy at all. I think he had the measles once. Other than that, you know, always ready to go and do what he had to do.
It was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. And I'll never forget, we went to a movie, Christmas Day, I think it was. It was either Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, because it was just my mom, my dad, Ronnie, and I, because everyone was at their in-laws. And Titanic, of course, of all movies, which is a long movie, and I don't even know how many times he got up to go to the bathroom during that movie. And I just, seeing him do that and seeing what he was going through was just horrible.
Initially, I went to see a GP, and they did, you know, they did some tests, and then they recommended me going to a gastroenterologist. Did all kinds of tests and did a colonoscopy. They basically narrowed it down to whether it being Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis.
Never having a sick child, you know, it really hit me hard. I felt very helpless. It was just not a good feeling.
Ron Mueller had always lived a life of action. But as he got sicker, he was unable to participate in many of the sports and recreational activities that were so important to him.
I just started missing more and more sporting activities, which I was used to always doing, and that really hurt a lot.
Ronnie was the type of person that was always upbeat, always on top of things, always happy, always go-lucky, and it was really disheartening to see him in that shape.
This can't be happening to me, you know. I've been involved in athletics all my life, and I thought, not that I'm invincible, but thought I was in pretty decent shape.
It just was almost like a reality, like, wow, I mean, this is kind of serious.
My biggest fear or concern was having to go to the washroom all of a sudden. You know, so I wouldn't leave the house knowing that, hey, I got a bathroom within 5 feet. So that was just getting annoying, you know, going, or thinking I had to go 20 times a day or 25 times a day was just so uncomfortable and wrong.
Ron was referred to Dr. Shapiro, a gastroenterologist who checked him for parasites and C. difficile infections. They all turned out negative.
I recommended a colonoscopy for Ron to further investigate his symptoms of the bloody diarrhea. And on the colonoscopy, he was found to have a pan-colitis. In other words, his entire colon was inflamed from the rectum all the way to the cecum, or the beginning of the colon.
The diagnosis wasn't good. The inflammation was caused by ulcerative colitis, an extremely painful condition that affects the rectum and large bowel. The common anti-inflammatory drug Azicol was prescribed, but after 2 weeks, Ron did not see any results.
So at this point, we needed to use something a little stronger. So that's when we started steroids, prednisone.
So I was on that for a while, and it seemed to be helping. I was getting more energy, going back to work, and like, hey, okay, this is a good thing. Probably about a year to the date, right around Thanksgiving again, I had another flare-up.
The diarrhea recurred, the bleeding, the crampy abdominal pain, and he was having diarrhea about 20 times per day.
He was not able to eat a lot, so he just kept losing weight and finally got dehydrated, and we went back to the doctor and they said he had to be admitted.
So he was hospitalized to receive intravenous steroid Salumedrol, which is very similar to prednisone. It's just an intravenous formulation, and it's more effective than prednisone in inducing a remission.
Dr. Shapiro had done everything he could for Ron. He sent Ron to a leading physician at the University of Chicago for a second opinion.
So they did a procedure right then and there, didn't knock me out or anything like that. So it was very uncomfortable and uncalled for.
He felt like he was like a test subject or like a, like a science project.
And I said to the doc, what's the problem? He said, well, it looks like his colon is inflamed in the front and the back, but in the middle is fine.
And he said to up the medicine.
I really came unglued because that just upset me, that that's all you can do is double medication. And he said, that's all you can do.
Disappointed with the lack of definitive answers from even a leading specialist, Ron continued with Dr. Shapiro's protocol, and for the next 2.5 years, his condition stabilized. The improvement, though, was only temporary.
I lost probably 25, 30 pounds again.
He started to develop the diarrhea again, and the diarrhea came back pretty fierce.
Put me back in the hospital a couple days, dehydrated, and then did all the tests they can, or again, blood work and what have you. They were like, you might be borderline of having surgery. Well, I was floored when they told me that.
Ron Mueller had been pretty fortunate to this point in his life. He had a family who loved him. He was a popular member of the community. He was active, intelligent, and well-respected. But his serious bout with colitis was threatening all of it.
After being in the hospital for the second time, it really hit me hard. Where do I go from here? Am I going to be living this for the rest of my life? Taking the medicine off and on and prednisone. I read into it that that's not good for your body.
One of the difficult aspects of treating Ron was that he was refractory to a lot of different therapies. So after a second hospitalization, I did recommend that he starts acidophilus. Acidophilus is a probiotic, or a good bacteria. Good bacteria is felt to strengthen the immune system. There's two main ones that have felt to be effective, lactobacillus and bifidobacterium. So I think that they're very good complementary therapies for ulcerative colitis. And I also recommended that he take multivitamins as well as calcium.
A friend of ours through our bank, he went to a holistic doctor, Dr. Darren Weissman. So he gave me his name and number. He's like, if you got an open mind, give him a call, see what he has to say, and go see him.
Ron Mueller came to see me in June of 2001 in really a trying place. And it had really been a brutal experience for him and his family, going through this diagnosis and being in the hospital multiple times with having the ulcerative colitis.
I didn't know anything about alternative medicine and what it could do, what it does, what it was about. And I didn't know, what to expect. I think he's a year older than me, so I could, I responded with that well, younger guy, caring, and, he just went down and did a bunch of one-on-one conversation first, and then he, basically checked out. He does a muscle testing and felt around the stomach and, what have you. He said, we're going to cure it.
My approach with him was just really to connect with Ron and to really help him realize that, the medical community was going to be treating him for the inflammatory bowel disease, the ulcerative colitis, but I wanted to connect with Ron to understand, how has he been living his life? What is the true cause and the root as towards why this manifested in his body to begin with?
He put me on a bunch of supplements, all natural, a no sugar diet. So I did that for 2 weeks and basically a detox. It was tough. You're so used to eating everything in sight, as I would call a seafood diet. down to reading labels and everything like that, you know, and I did it. And I definitely think it helped. The biggest thing to me too is water.
Water is imperative for optimal health. When a person, first and foremost, is not hydrated, when the water doesn't enter their cells, then their ability to detoxify and heal is affected on so many different levels. Stress, when it's triggered, affects our pH, and that causes the body to become acidic under stress. That acidity, the next response is inflammation. There's the itis. And for Ron's experience, it was in his colon, and inflammation is directly due to dehydration. So the key when I'm working with somebody is to first and foremost understand where's their stress levels.
Ron and Dr. Weissman traced the earliest stages of his disease to a time when Ron took over the family business. They believe the pressures during that time triggered the problem.
I think then when he took it over, it put a lot on his shoulder, and he took more than it actually was.
And I think a lot of stress came with that only because it needed a lot of work. It needed someone that was going to take the control and bring the business to where it needed to go.
And I was 24/7. It was controlling my life.
But Ronnie tended to keep things in a lot. He very rarely expressed himself when things were bothering him.
He just would keep it in. He'd get frustrated or upset, and he was a sensitive person to other people's needs at the sacrifice of himself. And in doing that, it resulted in an inferno within himself. And no matter what you think about the steps that we took in helping Ronnie along his journey to recovery were being really in tune with what he was eating. And so putting him on the eating program, getting him properly hydrated, being in tune with his sleep and his exercise, and him, you know, owning his power, expressing how he feels in a moment where in the past, Ronnie was a stuffer.
The hardest part of following Dr. Weissman's program is just, you know, sticking to it and keep telling yourself, this will help.
I'm like, yeah, whatever, you know, I'm not, okay, how is this gonna cure you? You know, this doesn't make any sense.
But then once he started getting better and he started, you know, putting his weight back on and started being Ronnie again, it kind of was like, oh, wow, you know, this is, you know, okay, so maybe this works.
You know, for some people it happens right away, but for Ronnie, it was an evolutionary journey. After about a month, he began to make shifts. And once he made the shift, really, and the key shift was truly him emotionally reconnecting to a part of himself that was unable to speak his truth.
I'll be the first to admit I'll eat my words. You know, this voodoo doctor is amazing in the sense that he brought my brother back to us.
Ron Mueller tended to internalize stress, which his doctor believed was the source of his debilitating illness. Once he got on a program to relieve his stress, things improved.
It took completely 2.5, 3 months for his symptoms that his body was expressing itself with to be eradicated.
Eventually, Ron got off of the medication, was taking no medication, had no more flare-ups, no more hospital stays, nothing. And he still continues going to Dr. Weissman. And the first time I seen him, I went up, I gave him a hug, and I said, thank you for giving my son back to me. I said, because it was such a great thing to have a good, healthy son back.
About 2 months ago, I went back to Dr. Shapiro.
I had a discussion with him concerning the risk of colorectal cancer in patients with ulcerative colitis. It's higher than the general population. So after discussing the risk, I explained to him it was very important to have a colonoscopy. I believe there's a very important test, not only for screening for colon cancer, but in Ron's case, I'm very interested to see how well he's responded to the herbal medications alone and the probiotics without the azacol.
I never tell people to get off medication. And the only person that should ever tell a person to get off medication is a Western medical doctor. What I do when people come on in is I harmonize medication to the body. I can use certain systems of natural medicine to make sure that their body uses the medication or the allergen in a non-offensive way. He is healthy and completely healed from this diagnosis of ulcerative colitis.
He's just seems to be a happy person. I guess I don't stop to think about it because he just seems to be doing well. I'm not worried about him.
My family was, probably the most important thing to me. My mom and dad, they were there through everything, by my side, supportive, as my sisters were.
We just kind of supported him in any way that we could. And then after seeing him start to get better, well then, you kind of change your mind and say, well, maybe, what he's doing to my brother is very valid.
I think he's just a great, great guy. He's a great friend. I mean, you cannot go somewhere and Ronnie not know somebody.
The best thing about feeling better now is just living a healthy life now, and I enjoy people, being around people, and I've got a lot of friends.
Ron Mueller has always had a lot to offer the world. He had forever been giving of himself, as it turns out, to the detriment of his own well-being. Now that Ronnie has been able to create a healthier balance in his life and overcome the physical problems that have plagued him, his contributions to his beloved family and friends are even more gratifying.